Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to the Islamic Vibes podcast. I'm your host Majid, and today I have with me my co-hosts, Brother Rash and Brother JK. Brothers, ahlan wa sahlan, and welcome to the show.
Assalamu alaikum, bro. How's it going?
All good, man. All good. What you say? What you guys saying?
Alhamdulillah, really good. Yeah. Just finally got around to catching a little bit of the football. Even though it's been on for ages, I haven't really been able to watch that much up to now because of it's during the day and busy and whatnot. So anyway, alhamdulillah, good. How about yourself?
Yeah, all good, man. All good. I mean, regarding the football and stuff, that's a podcast in itself. You know what I mean? There's so much kicking off. I know we did one at the beginning, but you know, a lot's happened. And but in regards to watching it, I think one thing it has done is I've got loads of people that have been watching the football, like people from backgrounds of, not really football backgrounds, like family and stuff like that. And yeah, it's all good, but at the same time as well, because it's in a Muslim Arab country, they're also not just talking about the football, they're also talking about the other stuff, about the hypocrisy and about
it's good.
Palestine.
It's good.
And do you know what I mean? So
yeah, a lot of the double standards, so-called double standards, have been highlighted, and yeah, that definitely is a good opportunity to discuss that, really.
Yeah, and on top of that, most of them are supporting Senegal today as well. So
which is good, yeah.
That's how it is, isn't it? And JK, man, what are you saying?
Good, yeah, alhamdulillah. Yeah, same. Not really been watching football, but I mean, yeah, it's generated quite a bit of debate, discussion, which is good. I know we did a topic on it last time, isn't it? So I think, there's it's obviously not too surprising, some of these you can call it hypocrisy or double standards, but definitely has allowed some Muslims to recognize that, we'll never be welcome until we really abandon our religion. So yeah, good.
Also, as well, there's that added element really where all the video clips going around. I mean, I think it's worth a mention actually that over the last few years there's been that big push on the Abraham Accords and the normalization, and a lot of questions that people ask me is, what's the situation on the ground like? Are the people, they must be all right with it, you know what I mean? Because they're going ahead with this. And there doesn't seem like there's any hoo-ha. And I've always said, look, there's definitely a big disconnection between the people and the governments. And a lot of these countries, it's not easy to voice your opinion. However, what we've been seeing is at the World Cup, there's so many clips going around where it's showing those, Israeli journalists
being
getting blanked
completely.
And for example, you've got one person, there's a Saudi fan. He's from Saudi Arabia. And he was saying, we don't recognize you and you don't belong here, you're not welcome. And one thing I noticed though, and obviously this is not a podcast about the football, but I want to get it in, is, you might have seen a Saudi fan, you might have seen Moroccans, you might have seen Tunisians, right? And Qataris in this discussion with these the journalists. And one thing I noticed, there's a common theme, is all of them, or not most of them that I saw, they all said, you don't belong here. This is our land. But they're not from Qatar. So what you kind of gauged from there is that what these guys were talking about is the Arab lands, the Muslim lands. And these are their lands. They didn't really separate from the fact that you have Saudi Arabia, then you have Qatar. Because if you look at the clip with the Saudi fan, he's saying, this is our country.
Yeah.
But he's from Saudi Arabia, right? So alhamdulillah, man, that's been one really good thing that's come out of.
Yeah, it's really motivating, especially when you get you feel defeated a little bit when you see all what the rulers are doing and all, like you say, the Abraham Accords and stuff. Yeah, definitely. I think that has been one of the positives. And then there's that movie as well, isn't there? Farha, the movie on Netflix. Yeah. So I haven't seen it yet. Have any of you guys watched it yet?
No, not yet.
I haven't watched it. But what I've been planning, the reason why I haven't watched it is I've been planning to watch it with the kids.
Yeah.
And it's just not materialized. But that's what I want to do, because
Me too. That's a good idea, really. Again, and again, they're up in arms about that as well. So, yeah, all of these things add to it. But like you say, this is where the Muslims themselves have to be intellectually clued up and go, look, we need to work together to rectify this situation. It's not something that's just going to go away by watching a movie and things like that. But it's really good at the same time that the awareness is building.
Yeah, bro, they need to see it in it, and they need to see it. So inshallah, let's get on to the actual podcast. And actually, before the podcast, I think it's worth me qualifying a point that JK mentioned, and he asked me whether I have an American flag on my jumper, and it's not an American flag. So just, if you get any hate comments like, you're talking about Islam, but you're wearing an American flag, it's not an American flag. It's just the design. Okay, so let's get into it. So the topic of today's podcast is the kind of results of the Census 2021 in the UK. So this is generally about in the UK itself, where there's been a lot of talk on the newspapers, on the media, people like Nigel Farage and stuff like this, kind of like talking about how they're at a critical time. Why? Because there's a couple of things from the census that was, which just kind of shocked them. The first one is that this is now the first time that Christianity is the minority religion in the UK, right? And there were other ones as well where, some major cities are like, minority white now, okay? But let's just talk mainly about from the religion aspect, from Christianity, right? So I want to break down some of the numbers, inshallah, right? So in regards on the census day, 21st of March 2021, 46.2% of people identified themselves as Christians, compared with 59.3% of the population in the 2011 census. So that's a 13% drop in a decade, okay? And hence why, because it's gone under 50%, hence why they're saying that, now it's a Christianity is a minority religion, right? So the number of people identifying as Christian dropped by 5.5 million in the past decade. While all the other major religions witnessed increased numbers, the deficit in those identifying as Christians was comfortably surpassed by the increase, and this is the interesting one, the increase of 8.5 million who stated no religion, rising to 22.2 million. So that's more than a third of the population of England and Wales, up from a quarter just a decade ago. So basically 22.2 million people in England and Wales basically identify themselves as not having a religion, okay? So almost all local authorities have registered an increase in the proportion of those stating no religion, with more than half of the population of 10 councils saying they are not religious, okay? And I mean, there's some other interesting stuff on here. Other than the major religions, the most common belief that is on the rise is paganism, right? And the Muslim population, it stood at 3.9 million or 6.5% of the total UK population in 2021, up from 4.9% in 2011. So you can see why this has rang the alarm bells for a few people, especially the people kind of leaning to the right, who are talking about, the UK, Britain being less white and Christianity being a minority, right? So from this, you can see there's two elements I think is important to discuss. The first one is the decline in Christianity. But the second one, and maybe which is more alarming, is the increase on people who are claiming that they have no religion. Okay? But anyway, I'm sure we're going to get into most of this stuff, right? So Rash, I'll just come to you first, bro. What's your thoughts on the census? I mean, you must have seen loads of stuff on the internet, right?
Yeah, so I think, like you said, there's loads of different angles that you can discuss. So, rightly, let's tackle one particular area first. So, you mentioned like the decline in Christianity, and this is something I've spoken to friends and colleagues for a number of years, really, because there's two sides of it. Firstly, there's obviously an outward decline in Christianity, and that people are willing to say, I'm no longer Christian. But that you have to add to that the fact that the actual people who even practice Christianity, that's been declining a lot long before that. So there would have been many people who previously would have happily on a census gone, I'm Christian, but what did they even do that was of a Christian in terms of a religion? So the practicing has been declining long before people are willing to put a tick on a census to say, I'm no longer Christian. And that the reason why that's important is previously it might have been quite like a bit more superficial, whereas now the advent of atheism or new atheism has triggered people to go, you know what, actually, I'm going to identify as atheist, or I'm going to identify as paganist or Satanist or all of these other ists, mainly because they recognize that, you know what, Christianity doesn't hold that same value that it used to have, and I want to be identified in a different way. So I think that's a big issue for these countries, in that it fits what the elites and the people of power want, and I'll spend a couple of seconds or minutes on that in a minute. But it's a big problem in that what the Western world and these kind of countries, and certainly some your non-Muslim friends and colleagues, sometimes don't realize is that a lot of the positive values that, say, for instance, the UK had, in terms of family values, in terms of looking after your old, in terms of passing down good, values that kept society more together, they were Christian values. Whereas the less number of people who identify as Christian, and therefore the less number of people who practice Christianity, that has a detrimental effect on the society. And to give an example, even like two names. So I think actually I only read just a few minutes ago actually that Dilly Hussein's got thingy that Jake Shields on his next podcast. I don't know if you heard, and he said something very similar to what Andrew Tate said previously, is that Christianity is flopping when it comes to tackling the issues thrown at it by the liberals. And when I say liberal, a lot of people assume that you mean liberal left. And this is a problem. And this is the other bit that I just wanted to quickly mention, because liberal left is one thing, but when we say liberalism, we're actually talking about this whole idea of, moving away, letting people maximize their pleasures, liberty, freedom. And that's not just left. In the Western world, that's left and right. That's still what Donald Trump still tried to push regardless. That's still what we're seeing. So coming back to the census, I think my main point is that this decline of Christianity, when your likes of some of these kind of popular people, like, in the MMA world, that Jake Shields guy, and in the social media world, Andrew Tate, they said the same thing. They said Christianity has failed massively in competing against this feminism, liberalism, and the current world order. And that's why people are no longer, they've lost confidence in Christianity, basically. And like I said, they lost confidence previously from a practicing point of view, because when you have secularism, religion somewhat starts to go out the window over a period of time. And then secondly, when you now have an alternative where people can be, you almost sound cool for saying you're an atheist nowadays. So then this census is just reflecting that, in my opinion. It's reflecting the society. I think this is going to lead to far, far worse. But I think first and foremost, it's going to be very detrimental to their society, and you can see why.
Yep.
You're on mute, Madge.
Some top points there, bro. Some top points there. I mean,
I'll elaborate on them later, but I just think we need to just think about that initial, what effect it's going to have on this society, really, and it's having already.
So that's good. That's good. I mean, let's do it that way. And I think for JK, rather than get your initial thoughts, because it might be similar to what Rash has said. So I got a question I think is important to discuss, to try to unpackage this whole issue, right? So I think it may be, I mean, Russia's touched upon it, but it might be worth like looking into why are people kind of leaving Christianity? Is it due to science, rise of atheism? Is it to do with the church scandals? Is it to do with what Russia's saying, no confidence in Christianity, especially the fact that it's so fluid, just to remain relevant, it has accepted everything anyway. So what does it mean to be a Christian? In the sense, like, you're doing everything that Christianity tells you not to do. So why then just say you're still a Christian, if you know what I'm trying to say? And Rush makes a really good point that people have stopped actually practicing Christianity long before, but they just kept the title. So when these sort of like surveys came about, they would have put a tick there because that's just how they grew up, and their parents, and they're probably sent to a Church of England school, right?
Yep.
But what do you think? What's your issue?
No, to be fair, I agree with what Rash said, and just to not repeat the points, but going back to your question around why, I think it is down to, there'll be multiple factors, so I don't think you can just put it on one. But I think the one that I bring it down to that has probably the biggest impact is probably the secularization of the population. Because, when we think about secularism, when we define it, we talk about separation of church from state, right? In effect, that definition, it probably isn't it's correct, but it isn't fully telling the picture of what's happening. This definition basically gives Christianity still some position. It gives the position of Christianity in the household, right? It can't come out in state and society, but you still have it and hold on to it, and it's your religion, personal religion, right? But what this census tells us, and the fact is, when the census happens every 10 years, right? It's actually generational. So when you've spoken to people of the past, I've had conversations with my colleagues and friends, non-Muslims, is they will say like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, my mum and dad went to church, I don't go to church, and their parents have been those that I don't really practice it, but I go to church. And what you'll find is slowly, from being a devout Christian, probably their great grandparents, to I go to church on a Sunday, to I don't even go to church, but I call myself Christian, to all the way to I don't even call myself Christian anymore. So it's a generational thing, right? So that change, what is a drop of what, 10%? How much? It's quite a big drop, isn't it? About 10% or whatever it was.
Yeah.
46%. It's not. I don't think it's as drastic as people just leaving Christianity. It's probably
13%, 13%
drop, right? Massive drop. I think it will be a reflection on, like Rash said, how people identify now. That they left it time ago. That already happened. It was more about how they identify in terms of what religion they identify with, and more like maybe bravery, not bravery. That makes it gives them some sort of
a lot. Media has been able to make religion look dogmatic.
Exactly.
So now it's, like I said, now it's quite cool or even popular to say I'm atheist or I'm not religious. I don't believe in God.
The opposite applies. To say you're religious or Christian, you're looked down on. You're, this dogmatic person, you just blind faith and all of that, right? So I think there are the objectives. But the point I was trying to make is that it's interesting, isn't it? Secularization, where we give a bit of benefit of doubt that they hold on to a personal religion. In fact, what does secularization cause? Secularism causes people to actually leave the whole religion. It isn't a separation. It's an actual leaving of the religion. So now what do we, I know we'll go into it, but what do we now as Muslims need to be careful of? If we're secularizing Islam, you're not just making Islam a ritualistic religion based in the house or the masjid. You're actually on the path towards total, wiping out of the religion. And that Jake Shields guy said that in 100 years' time, if we're going down this course, meaning his Christian people, Christianity will cease to exist. So I think that is the key point, because you could probably put a lot of things into that secularization.
Yeah. So just to add to that, JK, just to try because that's a really good point. I've never really thought about it that way. That when they talk about secularism and the way you said it, separation between state and life, right? So state, the way you live your life is based on the state, but in your personal choices, you can believe in your religion. But in fact, that's not true.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, look at Christianity. it like from a state level, from immediate level, state level, is completely mocked.
Exactly.
Cartoons about it, you got Monty Python, and it's like it's actually attacking
Yeah.
the Christian
Exactly.
values.
100%.
So there is none of this. So secularism doesn't have this, clear boundary between, as long as you want to believe in it, it's entirely up to you. In fact, that's not the case.
It's not.
It's slowly going to unravel. It's slowly going to take apart what is actually left.
Yeah, exactly. Like the points you made, like the fact that there's loss of confidence in the priests because of some of the abuse and all of that, and the fact that they're accepting of LGBT, they're accepting of gay priests, all of this stuff. That proves that. The fact is, it wasn't just a political statement, like the separation from politics. In fact, that cancer went all the way through their, what you could call their akida, their creed. Their creed started to get compromised. So they never stood up. Andrew Tate said it himself that, if you wore Jesus's gay top, astaghfirullah, he's our prophet as well, so it's an insult to Islam as well. Christians wouldn't do anything, but the same cannot be said of Muslims.
Well, it's happened this week, isn't it? Yeah, go on. Yeah, mention that.
Yeah, they called, astaghfirullah, they were saying that Jesus could have been transgender. Na'udhu billahi, how to even say something like that is disgusting. But the reality is, no one stood up to defend it. No Christian, and Muslims have stood up to defend it. We should, because Isa alayhi salam is our prophet as well. So, or is our prophet. We've got more right to Isa alayhi salam than anyone. So, I think there are multiple reasons, multiple factors. There's going to be all the stuff around population increase as well. So there's stuff like that. But I think the key factor for me is the secularization, the direction we're moving in the Western Hemisphere and UK in particular.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it historically, remember when they talk about the clash between the thinkers and the church, it's always been portrayed as if the church were persecuting the people of science, the people of rationale and this stuff. So already in the way when you read about it, that period, it's like as if, this is dogmatic. You have these people who are free thinkers and want to discuss things about the reality of the universe and etc. And they're being put down. So it kind of paints the picture that this is all made up. And the reason why they don't want people to actually think for themselves is because the truth is something different.
Yeah.
Right?
What's really, really important for people to reflect on here is that, a lot of the time, you mentioned the intellectuals, the clash between church and state. People need to think about the fact that secularism was born out of a compromise. If they don't reflect on this, and especially with the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the pudding today, yeah? At that time, they might have gone, this is actually, again, from man's limited mind, at that time, they might have thought, the way for humanity to progress is for us to still allow religion, people to be religious, but we don't want religion in state affairs because we recognize that was causing problems. And with Christianity, it was causing problems, because the kings and the elites, and they were oppressing the people on the ground, So at that point, religion in state was causing problems. So their solution was, okay, again, a man-made solution. Let's allow people to be religious in their personal spheres, but not in the public sphere, and therefore not in state. Again, what now, like I say, the reason the proof is in the pudding, now what's happened over a period of time, that complete compromise has been laid bare. Why has it been laid bare? Because right now, when they originally agreed that liberal values such as, the freedom of expression, to be able to blaspheme, that clashes with the people having a religious, link. So if I say someone's a Christian or as a Muslim, and I obviously have my red lines, but liberalism then goes, no, that's not a red line. You can say whatever you want. You can draw pictures of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You see these disgusting images of Isa alayhi salam. You see all of these things which are red lines. But this is what liberalism allows, and this is what secularism, which liberalism came from, allows. So then it might have been, and this is why it highlights it came from a compromise. The compromise allowed that ball to roll, or the snowball to start rolling down the what's it called, that cup turns into an avalanche, sorry, down the hill and stuff like that, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it crashed at the bottom. And you can now see that, wait, there actually it was flawed from the beginning. It just so happened maybe they didn't realize back then. Now it's blatant now, and what has it done in the process? It's destroyed Christianity. Christianity is what's been destroyed as part of it. And again, that's why I go back to my original point about, there still might be, there's the most, in terms of numbers, Christianity is still the biggest religion in the world. But ask yourself, why is it that so many Christians are questioning, why is it that our church has allowed gay priests? What is it with these transgenders and all of this, that, and the other, everything they've allowed? Why are they questioning it? They realize that, by allowing secularism in, and by Christianity not being able to hold that position of authority, this has been the result. Yeah. And this is where then you need to discuss Islam. Islam, even without a political entity, just as an idea and just as people carrying that idea, have still been able to oppose the liberal world order, and is opposing the liberal world order without that strength, with smaller numbers comparatively, and is growing from strength to strength, alhamdulillah, because we know why, because it's the truth. But it's interesting that the discussion is now happening.
So, in regards to with people leaving Christianity, like you're saying, right, for whatever reason, whether it's because they think, these guys are making everything halal from their point of view, this is nonsense. Whether it's that people are just, you can be everything that you want. There's no need to be a Christian because Christianity allows it. So why would you need to be a Christian for if Christianity allows everything anyway? You're just living the same. You're not practicing Christian anyway. On top of that, you believe in all the other things from liberalism. Why would you need to be a Christian for? Then there's the attack on from the atheism and so on. Now, out of all of this, and what we can see from the census in the UK, and this is going to be the case in the Western world, but let's focus on UK as an example, right? So you've got these now 22.2 million people that now that are saying that they don't belong to any religion, and you have these people that are moving away from Christianity, and the other religions are increasing in number, but it's not like at the same rate as the people leaving Christianity, right? No. So the question then we need to ask ourselves is, what fills this void? What fills this void where before you had these people who were Christian, maybe at some stage they were practicing, maybe then they were not really practicing, but they still held some like Christian values. But now they've totally rejected all of that. This then needs to be filled. This void, this vacuum has to be filled with something. And this issue of no religion, atheism, whatever you want to call it, what we're seeing now in the West, and we can talk about in the UK, is there is definitely a link. And I think what we're seeing is the fruits, the rotten fruits of people moving away from a religion is, look at society. Look at the society that we're living in, whether it's to do with issues of depression, whether it's to do with suicide rates, whether it's to do with all the kind of ills that we see in the society, right? When people are moving away from a religion, then they need to now accept something, and what they're accepting is obviously liberalism, right? Generous liberalism is the thoughts of, I don't need some divine book from the heavens to tell me how to live my life. I know how to live my life. I'm just going to be good to people, etc., etc. It's all based on whims and desires. But we look at the actual impact it has on the society in the UK and just say in the West in general, It's devastating. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, the thing is, we question about whether there's a void or what fills that void. There's always going to be a void when there's no, if they don't accept the truth, there'll always be that void, and people will always be searching for it. But the reality is, that which is dominant in society is what will fill that void, and that's why they're moving to what you call, no religion, or whether that's agnosticism or atheism or whatever you want to call it. That no religion, in essence, is a religion from my perspective. It is the religion or faith in liberalism, to be able to do what you want to do, fulfill every whim and desire. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, there are those who worship their whims and desires. So this is a religion in that perspective. Yes, it's not got rules and there's no collection of people. You don't really put them into that group. But the reality is that's the dominant thought. That's the dominant ideology. So that is what has filled that void, if you want to call it. And like you said, there's also that has led to many ills in society because it's not the truth. So it has led to depression. It has led to a rise in suicide. It's led to the ills of society and what we're seeing with liberalism. In that, where's the red line when it continually is moving? Because the boundary continues to move, because there is no in essence, there is no boundary. As long as acceptability will change. What was right 10 years ago is wrong 10 years ago is right today. What is wrong today will be right 10 years later. So that boundary will continually change, and that's why you will have destruction and decadence continue to occur. And I think the surprising thing for me is that there's an acceleration of that. In 10 years, all of that has happened. And if you think about it, just think about 10 years ago, what was not acceptable compared to today. Like, for example, one of the things that with this whole LGBT one love thing that's being promoted in England, in the World Cup, sorry, one thing that I've reflected on is, yes, it's not true that there's loads more people who identify as being gay or homosexual or whatever you want to call it, but there is a rise in people really advocating it.
Yeah,
that's definitely risen. That 10 years ago, people were reluctant. I'm talking about not non-Muslim. They were reluctant. Whilst there might have been some acceptability and, don't harm them and all of that, they were reluctant to actually wear it with pride. Do you know what I mean? Whereas now it's popular. Now it's cool. Now that is the thing to do. That is the political correct thing to do. And why, Germany will put their hands on their mouth and, do these, these, what do you call it? These promotional
protesting. It's like a protest.
protests or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. So
symbolism.
Symbolic gestures or whatever. The point is, if that's what's happened in those 10 years, what will happen in the next 10 years? So you're right. I think there's more to discuss, but I genuinely feel like the dominant way of life, religion, ideology will always fill that void. And because Christianity, because the rise of Christianity, the reason Christianity was so dominant in the past, in the sense of many people following it, it was used, right? Christianity was used for political gain. The Roman Church, they used it. So actually, that is not a coincidence that there was so many Christians in the world, right? So likewise, you can make the same comparison with today. The fact that secularism, liberalism is the dominant idea, that is what people will follow.
But what it brings about. I mean, we're talking about society, but let's talk about the individual, right? Now, obviously, we're Muslim. Alhamdulillah, we're Muslim, right? Now we're going to go through trials in life. We're going to go through situations where you're going to call out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It could be to do with your rizq, could be to do with death, it could be to do with loads of things, right? And I was thinking about this, obviously, in kind of preparation for this podcast. I was generally thinking about this anyway, like, because we believe, and we believe with conviction, it's difficult to try to go into the mind of someone else who doesn't believe. But just think about it, that how many things that happen in our lives or have happened to people around us, like really bad things. Like, for example, that brother who in Nottingham his wife and his two children were burnt and they died. You know this case in Nottingham
in
recently,
Clifton,
right?
in Clifton.
In Clifton, right? Now, what does this guy fall back on? He falls back onto the fact that, you know, this is decreed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that their ajal was fixed, that this person will not, whoever did it, he will not escape justice, right? On that day, he will not escape justice. You have something to fall back on. But imagine now you don't believe in a creator. Just imagine you don't believe. And look, you know what? Obviously the truth is the truth. But when people who believe in Christianity, they still have something to fall back on. I'm talking about the people who are now saying no religion.
Yeah.
When they come across these issues in life, man, I don't know how they would cope, what's there, you know, and that's why suicide, depression, and all these kind of things are on the rise, is because they can't cope.
Yeah, and you've answered the question of why this acceleration has happened. Remember, you know, when we say why the times are changing so quickly, why new things are constantly, like things you never heard of, you know, people identifying as dogs and trees, and like you just said, suicide. The reason all of these things have accelerated in a short space of time is that all of a sudden people have moved away from any religious background towards satisfying their whims and desires. But not just that, whilst liberalism is enforced over the top of them as well. Because what, you know, like this whole like LGBT lobby and stuff like that, the reasoning is around the fact that there are many people who are not accepting of this, but it's become the norm, and it's a social value now, and it's it's a public opinion. It's in a way where, like, you as an individual might be like, and again, remember, when you speak to individuals and you really push them and say, would you be okay with your son or your daughter coming home and coming out of the closet or whatever, they will say, oh, I'm accepting of it, but I wouldn't choose to happen to me. You know, like, even if you push them and go, oh, yeah, of course, I'll let my son and my daughter, it's up to them, they can do whatever they want. But if you still push them and say, choose, what would you rather? Would you rather them be straight, or would you rather them be gay? There's still a good percentage of people who will choose, even though they might be, like JK saying, is accepting because it's cool and fashionable, and you know, you're seen as a bigot or whatever if you don't accept it. But if you ask them to choose, they will still choose not to.
Deep down inside they would. Yeah,
exactly. And the reasoning is because this lobby, the liberal world order, everything is pushing people to think this way. Everything is pushing them towards thinking secular and non-religious, moving away from religion. And remember, when we say religion, the only real religions that are alive are those religions where prophets came, brought a religion, people held onto it when, you know, for a period of time, and over time there are remnants of it. So be it the Jews, be it the Christians, be it others, there are remnants of people who had messengers or guidance. It's just that they chose not to follow the next messenger that came along. Now what we're saying is, like Allah tells us, that people are making their whims and desires their gods. If you were going to give a name to the void that you're asking the question about, Maj, that void is that we're now, that the purpose of life has changed. Escapism is almost filling the void. Yeah, because in that previously you would have to, you know, have a purpose. You would link yourself to a religion and you go, that gave me purpose. Whereas now you don't need to do that, because you've got all of these other things that satisfy your whims and desires, that distract you from identifying what your purpose in life is. So when you've got your Netflix, when you've got your 9-to-5 job, when you've got all of these weird stuff that's happening and, you know, ways to satisfy yourselves, then, you know, it's easy to detract from answering those key questions. And those people are falling into that void, and yeah, they don't need to identify as Christian anymore. In fact, they don't need to identify as anything, because they don't even need to identify as atheist, because that way they'd have to, you know, then someone, when they push them, again, this is why I don't know if you found the same, some people won't identify as atheist because they can't defend the position. So I know some people who no longer are Christian, probably say they're agnostic, but hesitantly. And then I say, "Are you atheist then?" No, I'm not
No
really.
religion. They just say
I
no
think there's
religion.
someone up there. But
Yeah.
they've not spent the time to intellectually convince themselves one way or the other. But this life has made it is so busy, and all of the other factors made them think, well, I don't really need to think too much about it. They're definitely thinking about it, but there's enough stuff to keep you busy until it's too late.
Yeah, so that's a really good point, actually. I didn't think of it like that, because it is their purpose has become self-gratification, self-interest.
100%.
And there's so many things, because and it's not, when it's individually, yes.
But JK, just want to make
society has done that.
JK, want to make a quick point on that self-gratification, because you live in a materialistic capitalist society, yeah?
Yeah.
How much of the population actually get to live that life that is being pushed at them?
Exactly.
Bro, not a lot.
No.
And even less now with all of this
cost of living.
cost of living crisis, everything like that.
What happens? You know what I mean? It's like, yes, they want to maximize sensual gratification, but they can't even do that. What's the point of living?
Yeah,
exactly.
Rash made a good point. I think you said you listened to something about the way we live today, the ideology that we live today is got us so into this kind of self-interest and self-gratification. So those men who were revolutionaries back in the past and had the revolutionary kind of spirit, wanting for change, they're too busy chasing women and cars and whatever.
Yeah. And there's loads of things like that. There's the general feminization of women, of men. Feminization of men, where they don't feel, like they're not worthy anymore. The society is starting to become matriarchal rather than patriarchal. So men are suddenly starting, those revolutionary aged men, they're starting to go, you know what, they're having their vigor and their zeal all destroyed because of society. And some people in conspiracy wise saying that, there's other reasons for that. I won't go into some conspiracy theories and stuff, but it's genuinely happening. Those revolutionary age men are so busy, burdened with debt from university. Yeah. So you can't suddenly go, you know what, I'm not going to have a job. I'm going to work for change. You've got a debt you've got to pay off. You've got, if you want to live in this society, you've got a mortgage to pay off. You've got, then you want to chase the car and, like you said, all of those things without going into detail. So you can genuinely see that people aren't working for change because of the satisfying on this self-gratification kind of journey that they're all on. And this is part of this census, this idea that people are moving away from a grounding. Remember, Christianity was a grounding. Islam is a grounding. It gives you it's a furqan. It gives you a criteria to live by. Okay, Islam gives us a holistic criteria. Christianity gave elements.
It gave value.
It gave commandments. Like the 10 commandments from Judaism. And so it gave you at least something to live by. Something that if you held on, because it tried not to change over times, it was still a foundation, whereas liberalism just allows whatever the hell it likes, depending on the day of the week. And that's not a grounding. And that's why this acceleration, in my opinion, the reason we've seen this acceleration in the last 10 years is because it's being pushed from the top. And then the way entertainment industry has taken over the world, be it pornography, be it social media, be it all of these movie channels and what are they called?
Streaming service.
Streaming services, streaming services, social media. We have to at some point do a podcast on pornography. We do not realize just how bad the situation is in terms of people and how much. I read a stat the other day. Children between the age of 8 to 11, already the amount of access they have to pornography and the age of the child when they first come across pornography constantly going down. And how much they access it. You're telling me that if you introduce that into a society at that age group, at that consistency, at that amount, it's not going to destroy the minds of future generations.
That's a quote of Salahuddin. Nudity, you increase nudity in a population, something like, I'm paraphrasing, but that's how you destroy a nation.
But you know, like what you're talking about there, Rush. I mean, we're seeing signs of what's happening right now in the sense like with this Balenciaga issue, right? You understand where
Yep.
when you're talking about people now are following their whims and desires, they're actually like now worshipping their whims and desires. And you look at Hollywood and you look at what's happening with Balenciaga recently, where they're pushing bloody all sorts, man, devil worship, Satanism, pedophilia, some really weird pictures of children with amputated. It's just crazy.
Horrific.
It's horrific, right?
Disgusting.
But who pushes these type? Who pushes like who's linked to Balenciaga? It's all them pop stars and all them people that are famous, right? Who are those people? They're the people that the generations look up to. So in the past, it used to be quite interesting where you used to watch these videos and you used to talk about certain like in the old days they used to be like, oh, if you like rewind this song back, it will say certain things, right? I used to think, okay, it does, purely coincidental maybe, but who the hell's going to listen to this backwards anyway? Right? But now when you start watching this stuff and they start, you in Disney and Hollywood and all these signs that these people are doing, like this is really something that they're pushing. It's at odds with Islam. It's at odds with any kind of religion. It really is Satanism. Any thoughts on the Balenciaga thing?
Yeah. So go on, you go, JK, first. I've got a few thoughts as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's totally disgusting. And some of it's not a coincidence. What I'd say is not like the way they're trying to defend themselves now is ridiculous, because all of what they did there is these guys are
just sorry to interrupt you, Mad, whoever gives it, because this is not mainstream media. I think we need to explain what it
happened.
is, because I've spoken to a few people and they don't know about it. They're like, what are you talking about? I've not even heard about this. So it is worth giving what we're talking about first, because okay, I'll give you a quick account, because it's not mainstream media, and you'll be shocked. All of us are thinking, how is this not mainstream media? And to be fair, I'd never even heard of Balenciaga before this thing, to be fair, but apparently it's one of the biggest massive fashion companies in the world, one of the biggest. So one of the biggest fashion, one of expensive, biggest fashion companies in the world, in one of their photo shoots, have children with kind of carrying a bag, and the bag is of a bear, and the bear has got BDSM, like all of that weird kind of bondage gear on.
Gimps wear.
That's it, bondage gear on a bear, and the child is holding it. On top of that, there's other artifacts and things in the photo shoot which kind of are to do sex toys and stuff like that kind of stuff. On top of that, within other shoots within that kind of, I think it was their 2022-23 range of products, they've also got papers scattered around, and people have zoomed in and they can see child porn cases on there as well. So they got caught.
So just to give a bit more background on that, so this campaign that you mentioned about the teddy bear, that was the initial that was the initial one. Whoa, what the hell are they doing? And Balenciaga, just to give a bit of context, they are the protege of Balenciaga is Givenchy. So Givenchy, people know of. Balenciaga is bigger than them. Balenciaga's got
Givenchy or whatever, however you say it, I'm not sure.
But you know what I mean. I don't wear this stuff.
I thought he was on about some Irish bloke, man.
Shay Given,
Givenchy,
Givenchy, whatever how you pronounce it. But we've heard of them, right? And other brands, but Balenciaga are that level and probably higher.
They're higher.
They're
higher,
higher, but they like only is
very unique.
Very unique niche.
Exactly. And the thing is, that campaign caused uproar. People are like, what the heck? This is ridiculous. But what then people did is look back at previous ad campaigns and found. So there was this Balenciaga bag where they had this on top of this report, and this report is of a court case related to this. I looked into it. So they're called Free Speech Coalition, and they represent the adult entertainment industry, basically pornography industry, for what is allowed in pornography and like to basically push the edges. And they did a case against the court or the US government basically to say, certain levels of child pornography should be allowed. So, and I don't know whether they won it or not, but that was the case. And this is that Balenciaga putting that in is basically advocating that this 100%. Is what should be allowed. So what they're doing, they're pushing the boundaries of what's allowed. And then they had other books that people, if you look at these books, these are placed, right? These products are not, when they do an ad, every single product is well thought of. And it's not a coincidence, I'll just go to a random desk and take a picture. Nah, mate. They've thought about every little thing from the bloody paperclip.
Even when we're doing some pictures for our podcast, we'd think, oh, let's check. Yeah, and you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar company not going to care that there's some 100%. Papers on the...
And it's disgusting. I won't even advise to search someone. It's disgusting. But they've done it on purpose. Obviously, it's subliminal, but because they want to advocate this pushing of the boundary. Like I said, they want to push and push and push and push. So it,
So what they try to then off the back of so that's what's happened. There's been a massive, there's been a huge backlash. Yeah. Off the back of that, they've apologized and they said they're going to sack the photographer and people like that. So they've tried to lay the blame on the people setting up the set and things like that. But there is no way at all that this is just because of one photographer setting things up the way he set up. If you then do some digging, like you said, you don't want to search this stuff because it's horrific. Yeah. So one of the things is, the CEO of Balenciaga's parent company is a company called Kering. Yeah, and his name is Francois Henry Pinault. He's actually Salma Hayek, the actress, her husband, and he's involved in selling. It's disgusting to even mention it. Like they're models of children that they use to do disgusting acts with, like child sex mannequins. This is the kind of weird, messed up stuff. Serious. And these are people who are in the hierarchy of these companies. Yeah. But what's worse, trust me, what I think is actually worse than all of this is how mainstream media are quiet on it.
Exactly, 100%.
Just imagine the level of which these links go to, that they're quiet on it. Remember, annoying to always mention certain people. I won't mention the name, but certain people have come out, whether it's Kanye West or whatever, have come out. When something they do and say is wrong, they get cancelled like that. Banks, their Apple Pay stops working, banking stops working, their login, their Uber stops working. And you're talking about these kind of people. Yeah. What happened to they're fine. Okay, they've said sorry or whatever, and they carry on. Just goes to prove that Spider's network of elitist power and what they're into at the top of that network is just absolutely horrific.
And the other thing Madge mentioned is there's a link to Satanism as well. So some of these ad campaigns, there were pictures of children with that satanic images. Apparently they, Balenciaga's B-A-L, right? Apparently they spelled it B-A-A-L, which means exactly, Baal, which means like demon or Satan. Or
demons in Christianity. It's a demon who used to eat kids.
Exactly. So all of this is deliberate. And Satanism and the decadence of where it leads to, obviously, like we don't just spell it out, but Satanism will lead to that decadence. They have this pride around it, and they call it pride as well. But they have this pride around how can we push the boundaries? How can we normalize this? And the reality is, like I mentioned before, is there is no boundaries. So when one thing, if you think about it, 20 years ago, adultery, not even 20, maybe longer, 50 years ago, adultery, fornication is not just, it's illegal. You can't do that. There's punishments, whatever. Then that became normalized. It's allowed. I mean, it's celebrated now. Go cheat and find another woman and find a young woman. Yeah, you'd be bloody.
Your player.
Yeah, top G player. Yeah, exactly.
Value man.
Exactly, you're a high value man. Do you know what I mean? So it's celebrated now. Then it became, homosexual. Yeah, it's all good now. It's all fine. Incest. It's all fine. All of that. I mean, if the boundaries keep moving, then obviously this kind of stuff that we see as disgusting, we will always see as disgusting because we have a set standard. They may see as disgusting and there may have been a backlash, but eventually they will start to accept it. because there are reasons, like homosexuality, they now have an articulate way of saying science, science-based evidence that it's part of nature. Your sexual orientation is a scientific evidence around, that's natural. You can't choose and all of that. So they've backed it up. People say the same with pedophilia now. They're making that argument.
Why can't you, bro?
Do you know what I mean? So there is no boundary, and constantly they will push and push and push the boundary. There may be events like this where there'll be backlash, but trust me, there'll be more and more and more, and eventually it'll become acceptable and normalized.
But I think the important point is what both of you guys touched upon is what we're talking about here. We're talking about influences, i.e., basically this stuff that's common is right at the top. It's right at the top. I mean, like, for example, Balenciaga, obviously there's like subtle messages, right? But youngsters and stuff like that, they would love to wear Balenciaga clothes. You know what I mean? Because that kind of shows that, you got money, you got a bit of status and stuff like this, right? But these people like, Salma Hayek's husband, all these people, they're at the top. People like Epstein. These people, and
good point.
This all rolls downwards.
Yeah, definitely.
It rolls downwards.
Yeah, the fact that Epstein got killed in a prison, that means there's a lot more people involved in that at a very high level than is going to come out, isn't it?
100%. If Prince Andrew and all of these, mate, this is a high
goes
level
right
of
to the
stuff.
top.
Yeah,
and
right
again,
to
it's
the
not
top.
it's difficult to speak about. And again, like you say, a lot of people don't speak about it because they're scared as well. This kind of stuff. A mainstream channel probably won't speak about it because they recognize that there are powers at play that will stop them.
And who controls the mainstream? You got Rupert Murdoch and all. They control all of that. So that's why this actually got released on TikTok, but people were talking about it. And yes, it got to the level of them having to apologize and stuff like that. But you're absolutely right. Did BBC or Sky really report on this? Not really, no. So
Bro, they're busy reporting about the Qatari human rights, innit?
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So you know what, guys, inshallah, what I'm going to do is try to bring the podcast to a close. And one of the main reasons why is, I'm not sure if you guys could hear, but there was a bit of distortion when you guys are speaking and stuff. So either the guys at Balenciaga are onto us, or right, or could be a technical issue. I don't want to lose the whole episode. Yeah. So just get your kind of final thoughts on what we discussed, and do you know what I mean? Try to bring it together. I know it might be a bit premature, but I'm just thinking I don't want to lose the session. So I'll start off with you, Rash. Your final thoughts, man. I mean, we discussed all the issues to do with the census, and Balenciaga is probably just a byproduct of what happens when you move away from the creator. Definitely the truth, but even a false creator, which gives you some sort of guidance, when you're purely subservient to your whims and desires, then as JK was saying, there's no boundaries. But well, what's your thoughts, bro?
Yeah, I think it is a good time to bring it. I think we discussed the main thing, so I don't think it's an issue bringing it to a close. Especially as Afi's not here, I'll do what he normally does. Is the two topics are very much linked, because as society becomes less religious, as it has been, and the census proves that as well, then you're going to get people moving towards these things that are satisfying their whims and desires. What I would say is that this is just highlights the signs of the end of times, because we know that we're told that zina will become rampant. We're told that, things like women will be wearing clothes yet naked, the way they're wearing tight-fitting clothes and stuff like that. We know that, like children, how they will treat their parents. Hadith Jibreel, when he talks about the slave, what's the say? How does it go again? It's to do with the slave woman will give birth to her master or mistress. Yeah, all to do with the disobedience of children and treating their parents like slaves. Yeah. So what we really need to reflect on is that these things are going to happen in society because they are the signs of, the end of times are here, and again, okay, that might still be 100,000, whatever number of years away, but the signs are getting more closer. And maybe that's another reason, you know, how JK was saying the last 10 years or so, you know, these things seems to just be happening more frequently. And that's also another sign of the end of times, that when something, a calamity of certain nature happens, another one will follow it quickly after for humanity.
Bro,
You know, so
the river Euphrates drying up.
that's drying up. Yeah, exactly. So it's all happening. And Islam has told us about all of this before. And this Balenciaga stuff is just, you know, like we said, there's red lines, but these are like so far past these red lines. Even a, you know, your normal non-Muslim friend or colleague will be like, that's disgusting, man. But when there's pornography at the rate that it is, like I said earlier on, then who knows what the hell people are watching in the confines of their homes, because it's all accessible. You know, we talk about drugs, don't they? They talk about how people move from one drug to the next because, you know, it becomes what
you get used to it.
You get used to it, so you want the next high. Apparently those people who study pornography and stuff, they say the same happens with pornography. The thing that you watch and thingy whatever, then later on you need to get something worse, and I don't know, it's sickening. And this society is going down that route, and this Balenciaga stuff just highlights it. These people have so much wealth that if they were just interested in women, they could go out and buy women. But they have so much wealth that that's not enough anymore. So then they move on to men and men. They move on to children now. They move on to animals. And you feel sick from just saying it, but it's happening. Just because it's not there in your face on mainstream media, it's happening, sadly. So all I would say is we need to work to make sure we protect ourselves and our children from it, because it's all around us. And just be aware, I think. And this is, as Muslims, Islam, and part of the census was also the increasing number of Muslims, alhamdulillah. But numbers is not just the main thing here. It's the fact that we need to go back to Islam, because it is Islam that will protect us from all of this. It's Islam that's warned us about all of this. And if we do that, then alhamdulillah, whether we suffer from it in this life, you know, we'll get rewarded for it in the next life. But we have to do our bit. We really have to do our bit.
Yeah, man, jazakallah khair, bro. And yeah, just a quick point on that, and is the fact that we can't. There are some people who they when they see things like the census and the results, they will say, look, there's nothing, we don't need to do anything, because over a certain amount of time, everyone's going to become Muslim anyway. But that's not the point. We need the deen of Islam. If all the world was Muslim and yet the deen of Islam was absent, then what value does that really have? But it's a hypothetical scenario anyway. JK, what are you saying?
Yeah, I mean, on that as well, even in that percentage of Muslims, no doubt there are Muslims that don't practice. So let's not kid ourselves. It's not like all of that whole percentage of amazing quality Muslims. I'd like to believe majority are, but there's the reality is even Muslims are affected by secularism and abandoning majority of Islam and just being able just to accept that they are Muslim. So let's not sit on our laurels or think that, oh yeah, we're on the rise and we'll get there. So yeah, the point I want to link to that, the point I wanted to make is that, you know, secularism and liberalism, right, is accepting, not even accepting, it promotes perversion. It actually promotes perversion, right? So as more things get more perverted, it will start to accept it. As I said, the boundaries continues to move, right? So what we don't know what will be acceptable in the next 10, 20 years. And taking it back to ourselves and what we need to do as Muslims is really not allow ourselves to kind of move with that flow and move with the wave of this secularization and liberalism, because it will affect Muslims as well. We live in the West. Not only that, these ideas and content is pushed in the Muslim world as well. I was just watching a video of Netanyahu, I think years ago. He was like, oh, there's one key difference between Iraq and Iran. Iraq doesn't have this, but Iran does. Iran has 200,000 satellites, right? He goes, forget doing the, what did you call that, velvet glove or, you know, clandestine kind of ways of kind of winning them over. Just stream Beverly 91210 there or whatever, and stream the Hollywood lifestyle, the American lifestyle, and you will win them over. That's how you do regime change, because then they will demand it. That is a key lesson to learn there, in that, look, they themselves know that in order to reduce the potency of Islam and reduce the strength of Islam is by secularizing the deen and allowing Muslims to become secular and liberal. So what does that mean we need to do? We need to go back to our deen, go back to the truth, understand what it really means to be a Muslim. It's not merely salah or zakat or hajj. It is understanding that Islam is a comprehensive, full system and way of life. Once we accept that and understand that and call for that, inshallah, that's when the strength will come back. I think, Maj, you share the video of Abu Trika, and he said that the Egyptian football player who was on the TV was like saying that for the Muslims, the strength is in Islam. As long as we hold firm to Islam, we will be victorious, and that's 100% true. So that's really my lesson. There's lots going on, we've discussed a lot, and that's the message really. We as Muslims need to refer back to Islam comprehensively, understand it, and not sit on our laurels, because it will affect us and our children eventually.
Yeah, no, 100%, bro. And as I've mentioned this before many a times as well, that the world is crying out for Islam. The world is crying out for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it agrees with the nature of man. When man becomes subservient to his whims and desires, then there are literally no limits. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that they are worse than the cattle, right? And this is so true, because cattle don't do the things that humans are capable of doing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Allah's created humans in the best form, but then also rendered them the lowest of the low. The fact that we have the capability of reaching the stars. However, we also have the capability of being worse than animals.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's really important, that we need to see. The world is crying out for this. And I personally believe that certainly the West, it's going to bring about its own, the way it's going. It won't even need Islam to destroy it. It's already detonating. It's like a self-detonating with everything, because we say there's no boundaries, but there's only a certain amount you can do, because you're gonna run out of things. I mean, today's kids, so I'm trying to say things are limited. It's like there's gonna come to a stage where what's next? Do you know what I mean? But inshallah ta'ala, what we will see is that Islam is there. Yes, the census show that the Muslim population is increasing. A lot of this is down to just the birth rate and stuff. But I would like to add, though, that in a time where the overwhelming media coverage about Islam is negative and has been for decades, when you have in the West, you have people becoming Muslim, non-Muslims becoming Muslim, even though there's so much bad press, and also one of the main things that Islam is accused about is being against women and this and that. The amount of women that are embracing Islam, it really goes to show that the haqq people will find it, right? And the other thing really is that even these people that say that they're not religious, or they don't have a religion, they might not say atheist, because atheism is more of a belief, in a sense, like you've established what you think is the truth. Many of these might just have given up on Christianity. So what we should do really is, in our capacity, as much as we can do, is give dawah to people when we have the opportunity, to non-Muslims, because surely they're going through problems that Islam can provide the solutions for. But from a societal level, obviously we know this can't happen without the implementation of Islam itself. So guys, inshallah, I'm going to bring the podcast to a close, man. Really enjoyed today's session. And I thought this episode really highlighted some really important things, which I hope, I benefited from it. And I always say this because I always benefit from every episode, but I benefit from it. And I hope the people watching this and listening benefited. And also want to add that, alhamdulillah, some of the listeners, the people watching on YouTube, they do add some comments sometimes when they found that they benefited from it. So please, add your comments. Let us know, whether we are speaking good stuff or we're speaking nonsense, or if we benefited you. And if we have benefited you, then inshallah, definitely share this with family and friends. So really on that note, brothers, Jazakallah khair so much for coming on. And inshallah, like I always say, see you guys on the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.